Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Mathis Show. Wednesday, hump day. Baltimore Ravens tomorrow taking on the Cincinnati Bengals for Thursday night football. Short week for the Ravens. Still in a holding pattern right now, waiting for the vote to be called on Judge Kavanaugh. I thought that may have happened by now. Odds are probably will happen this week. Yesterday, of course, the 17-year anniversary of the horrific attacks on America in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. President Donald Trump speaking in Pennsylvania.
We're gathered together on these hallowed grounds to honor the memory of nearly 3,000 souls who were murdered on this day 17 years ago. We're here to pay solemn tribute to the 40 passengers and crew members on Flight 93 who rose up, defied the enemy, took control of their destiny, and changed the course of history. Today we mourn their loss, we share their story, and we commemorate their incredible valor.
MSNBC host Joe Scarborough from Morning Joe getting a lot of blowback today on a op-ed that Mr. Scarborough wrote in the Washington Post. This ran yesterday on the anniversary of 9/11. Joe Scarborough writing in his op-ed that Donald Trump is a graver threat to America than the 2001 terrorist attacks, also saying that the president is harming America more than any foreign adversary ever could, and declaring that Donald Trump presents a graver threat to America than the 2001 terror attacks. Understandably, a lot of blowback coming to Mr. Scarborough right now. Piece in Real Clear Politics this morning. Reading from the piece in Real Clear Politics, imagine the comparison. A major television host in the 1950s, like a Walter Cronkite or Edward Murrow, declaring that President Eisenhower presented a quote-unquote graver threat to America than Tojo and the Imperial Japanese Army did at Pearl Harbor. It's a reasonable comparison. 17 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, was not that long ago. There are still a lot of families that very much remember losing loved ones that day. A lot of people that recently died as a result of disease and cancer. A lot of first responders that are still gravely affected by the events that took place 17 years ago. And the media obviously has a burr under its saddle with Donald Trump. Not exactly sure why necessarily. Why I understand Donald Trump constantly calling the media out as fake news. I'm not sure Donald Trump is really too far off point on that. I've done writing in the past. I've obviously hosted a radio show. I've done television. All these mediums are different, ladies and gentlemen. I think that the medium that is easiest to get in trouble on is radio, because you're talking on a live format for hours upon hours, trying to be relevant, trying to get your points across. And it's happened a few times, not very many times, where I've said something that I wish I could take back. Television is more scripted than radio. Radio, obviously, you have a format, you have a rundown, you have bullet points on what your topics are going to be. You do your show prep, but you're going off the cuff many times. Television, a lot of times you're reading off of a teleprompter. And then you have writing an op-ed, for example, where you're reading it time and time again. It goes through an editor. Usually the editor will make some small changes to it. Then you look at the changes and you give it the thumbs up, thumbs down. There's some time to contemplate what you're putting in writing before it runs in the Washington Post. To compare the rhetoric of Donald Trump to what I believe is probably one of the single most horrific days in American history seems a little aggressive, if you will, a little excessive. Also seems like whatever the grievance is between Mika and Joe Scarborough, that you're probably shutting a lot of ears down by making those comparisons. It also brings a larger story here that we've talked about fairly extensively over the last couple weeks, which is how much of an existential threat is Donald Trump when it comes to foreign policy. Again, putting his style, his rhetoric aside for a second, from a foreign policy standpoint, Donald Trump has a pretty good track record right now. When you look at rebuilding a relationship with Israel, for all of the talk that we do when it comes to Russia, pretty much Donald Trump has kept Vladimir Putin at bay. Definitely a lot more at bay than former President Barack Obama ever did. When Putin was retaking Crimea, moving through Ukraine, and we can just go around the globe and look at how disastrous Barack Obama's foreign policy was. Barack Obama coming out last Friday, reintroducing himself to the country when he spoke at the University of Illinois, and went on a hour-long diatribe attacking the president by name, attacking his policies, in what honestly was one of the more narcissistic speeches I had seen from Barack Obama. Now, keep in mind, Barack Obama, over the last 2 years, for the most part, had stayed off the stage. And Barack Obama was very appreciative for George W. Bush doing the same and allowing Obama to have his own administration. And George Bush really, and still to this day, for the most part, has stayed in the shadows. Barack Obama gave it about 2 years. Obviously, I can understand why Obama is frustrated with Donald Trump, who has been dismantling his presidency, which, by the way, is what Donald Trump ran on. And the American people really did not embrace Barack Obama. And I think that's a point that really has to be made. Barack Obama came in like a rock star in 2008 and had the privilege of controlling the House and the Senate. And his primary goal was pushing through health care, the Affordable Care Act. And we need to go back roughly 10 years right now. This is significant because the majority of Americans, yes, there were some changes, some tweaking that needed to happen with the healthcare system in America, but they did not want the Affordable Care Act. And Obama spent all of his political capital to get that done. And there was a lot of trickery that was also used, ladies and gentlemen. Without the death of Senator Ted Kennedy, that probably doesn't happen, pushing it through in the waning hours of the year, with not a single Republican vote. Knowing at the end of the day, the Democrats, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, knew that by pushing the Affordable Care Act through, millions and millions of Americans would lose their health care. That they would become dependent on the government, i.e. their neighbors, to provide their health insurance, putting them on Medicaid. Millions of Americans that had insurance, had catastrophic plans, were providing insurance for themselves, lost that insurance, and then on top of it, just the infrastructure of the website and the failed rollout. It was the beginning, ladies and gentlemen, of the Tea Party movement, which then led to the Republicans taking the House by 63 seats, taking the Senate, Mitt Romney almost beating Barack Obama in a midterm election. And for the next 6 years, Obama's presidency precipitously went down. That's the reality of it. And over those 6 years, the Republicans maintained control of both chambers of Congress, picked up the majority of governorships across the country, and started controlling state legislatures. And the 45th president of the United States would be Donald Trump. And the left still believes that Barack Obama is going to be the savior for the Democratic Party. Looking at a piece in Town Hall this morning, Obama's return may energize Republicans more than Democrats. I was joking around about this yesterday. It's true. It's true. Watching former President Barack Obama over the weekend and really on Friday came across as an incredibly narcissistic speech. It was also just riddled with bold-faced lies. I was having lunch with Professor Rick Vass, professor of rhetoric over at Towson University, at Bread and Circuses, Tell Steve and Martha that Jimmy Mathis sent you. My spot Bren Circuses right across from the courthouse in Towson off Chesapeake and Delaware Avenue. I try to get lunch there almost weekly with Rick Vatz, and we were talking about the speech from Barack Obama on Friday at the University of Illinois. And Barack Obama starts to travel down the path of fake news. And Barack Obama says, can you remember when I ever targeted Fox News? I almost laughed out loud. Barack Obama, remember, was wiretapping James Rosen, among other employees at Fox News. Barack Obama was using the Department of Justice to wiretap the Associated Press, was using the FCC to try to control content within America's newsrooms. Kelly, I don't have the count in front of me, but some organization ran a tally on how many times Obama used the word I or me, and it was like over 100. I think this piece in Town Hall is spot on. Obama's return may energize Republicans more than Democrats. Reality is, yes, Barack Obama was extremely popular back in 2008, 2009, but come 2010, his popularity dwindled. And the Republicans were afraid to embrace conservatism like they always are, which is why we put up McCain in 2008 and Mitt Romney in 2012. It was Republican light. It was what we believed would be palatable to the opposition. And of course it wasn't. Now, Joe Scarborough can say what he will about Donald Trump, but I think one point that cannot be argued, there is nothing soft and fuzzy and easy about Donald Trump. Let me tell you, that lands with a lot of Americans when they believe that our government and our leaders are petulant and they don't fight for the American people. Now, listen, I am not an always Trumper, and I have a laundry list of issues with this president. And one of the larger ones, like many Americans out there, I think that he should have more decorum and treat the office with more dignity than he does. But that has nothing to do with his policy and what he's pushing through right now and the accomplishments that he has with a Congress that is pretty much out to lunch right now. Weak leadership with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. I will give Mitch McConnell credit for one thing, keeping the Senate, keeping them on the Hill, not allowing the Democrats to go out and hit the campaign trail. And right now in D.C., we're not talking about Judge Kavanaugh, who will probably be confirmed this week, if not definitely the beginning of next week. Either way, he will be confirmed. I can almost guarantee that. The Democrats right now, believing in the upcoming midterm election, which is roughly 2 months away, they think that they may have a path to take the Senate. And there's definitely a path to take the House. Too hard to handicap that race. But there is absolutely a possibility that there's a possibility for anything to happen on this right now. Again, it's too hard to handicap. But Democrats could take the House and they could take the Senate. But they will not have 2/3 in the Senate, which is what is going to be needed to remove Donald Trump. So once you get past the theatrics of all this, Trump is not going anywhere. And other than the tax bill, which right now Trump is trying to make permanent, other than the tax bill, where has he had the assistance of a Republican-controlled House and Senate to move forward on a conservative agenda? It's non-existent. And now you have Barack Obama out there on the campaign trail like he was this past weekend and Friday when he kicked it off at the University of Illinois. And it starts to conjure up thoughts, I think, in a lot of people's mind about how bad Obama was for the country. I don't think Obama's helping the cause here. I really don't. Because you have Democrats on one hand that are saying the economy is not doing well. You have Donald Trump out there pumping his fist on GDP, on the unemployment number, on wages going up, on more jobs being available. Then you have a Democratic Party that's saying, well, wait a minute, that's not exactly the case. These are fake numbers. This is disingenuous and a lie from President Trump. And in the exact same day, you have Barack Obama standing at the podium saying things are going well, but it's my fault because of policies and things that I did many years ago. It looks like there is a disconnected message coming out of the Democratic Party right now. And I just don't think that Barack Obama is the right salesperson to talk about Donald Trump abusing his position as commander-in-chief. When Barack Obama was weaponizing every single department within the federal government that he could get his hands on, from the EPA, the IRS, the DOJ, any acronym will do. Wasn't that long ago, ladies and gentlemen. We're only talking about 2 years when you had the IRS with Lois Lerner, who should be in jail right now. You want to talk about lock her up? That was targeting conservative groups, political opposition, like Catherine Engelbrecht, who we had on the program many, many times. Because she was running True the Vote, a conservative organization, was asking for tax-exempt status. You can make the argument that maybe she should be granted that status, maybe she shouldn't. She definitely, for simply applying for it, should not have the full weight of the federal government coming down on her personally, her husband, and her businesses. And the same thing with various other agencies, most notably the Department of Justice, that Barack Obama weaponized to go after a free press. And when I was having lunch with Rick yesterday at Bread and Circuses, and we're talking about the speech from Barack Obama, and we were talking about, and he's the professor of rhetoric, and I love talking rhetoric with him, the rhetoric of Donald Trump. Granted, Donald Trump may complain a little bit too much about fake news and not getting a fair shake in the media, but my question to the professor was, when did Donald Trump ever, from a punitive standpoint, do anything against the media? He hasn't. Again, he complains all the time, but he never sicked the Department of Justice on a major news operation. He never used the Department of Justice to wiretap the free press. I do not remember that. Hasn't happened. It'll be interesting to see right now, because what you're seeing from the left is a lack of messaging and a lack of a game plan. You have Elizabeth Warren kind of breaking from party ranks, saying that we need to impeach Donald Trump. You have the majority of the Democratic Party saying we don't want to talk about impeaching Donald Trump. You have some Democrats that are running with invoking the 25th Amendment after the New York Times released their op-ed piece last Thursday, which they never should have done. I have a major problem with that. There is no cohesive message from the Democratic Party right now. And in the past, what they had always ran on was income inequality and everybody's getting the shaft, fairness. They don't have that right now. And I'll tell you something, it's not a winning strategy, and it hasn't been for the 8 years that Barack Obama was president. Keep in mind, when he won in 2008, that was not his message. It was one of unity and being positive and uniting us. Now, again, he never delivered on any of that. And the second that he was sworn in, he went negative and went negative quickly. And then everything came back to everybody's being disenfranchised, income inequality, unfair pay for women, and doom and gloom is what the Democrats ran on for the next 6 years after the midterm elections of 2010 and continued to lose elections all the way back to 2016 when Hillary Clinton, for all intents and purposes, was going to be a coronation. And how did that work out? And now you have a Democratic Party that has absolutely not only no bench, which they do not have, they have no message, no platform, and really no leadership. Other than Barack Obama, they had to dust him off. And he comes across as being very, very, very disingenuous, which is my radio word for bona fide liar. And that's why I think this piece in The Hill is spot on. Obama's return may energize Republicans more than Democrats. And like I've said before, ladies and gentlemen, I am already past the midterm election because I kind of really don't care about it. I really don't. I'm looking at 2020. on who the Democrats are going to put up to challenge Donald Trump. And I see no bench. Who do they have? Maybe Elizabeth Warren, maybe Joe Biden. I understand the media, and a lot of people like Joe Biden. He knows how to work a room. But be very clear about something. He is no spring chicken. And he's been dealing with some health issues. From a constitutional standpoint, Barack Obama could run for a third term. If he wanted to. I don't think he could win. Reality is a lot of people hurt very much under the Obama administration. You cannot control the White House for 8 years, and your entire message is going to be how bad everything sucks for everybody. Think about it for a second. I'm not joking, Kelly. You can't have the top job for 8 years and talk about everybody's getting the short end of the stick, income inequality, and the first black president that did very little for African Americans. I do think things have actually calmed down a little bit. Think about all the protests in the streets, the riots, the war on police. I mean, do you want to go back to those days? And now Barack Obama wants to spike the football, where he's saying everything good from an economy standpoint is because of him, while you have the rest of the Democratic Party saying, whoa, things aren't that good. When the reality is, unemployment right now is basically at full employment at 3.8%. Now, anybody that's listened to me over the years, I have spent a lot of time talking about U6 unemployment, and one of my criticisms of Barack Obama was the amount of people that were leaving the labor workforce. That was a way that president was able to manipulate the official unemployment number for the Department of Labor. Reality is, more jobs are available right now. The amount of people that are dependent on the federal government is shrinking. Some basic campaign promises that this president, Donald Trump, ran on, he's delivered. One of them getting rid of the individual mandate, but getting to put health care back in the hands of the consumer. Beginning to roll back regulations, trying to bring manufacturing back to America, focusing on national sovereignty and border security, something that hasn't happened going back to the mid-'80s. Yes, that resonates with people, absolutely. Absolutely, and the Republicans are petrified of it, including here in the state of Maryland with Governor Hogan. I made a remark on Monday that the Governor Hogan was a missed opportunity for the Republicans. I got a couple emails on that, asking me to extrapolate and explain what I meant. Where has there been a cohesive message in the state of Maryland when it comes to what the Republican Party wants to do? Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Governor Hogan boycotting the convention in Cleveland, boycotting this president, saying on election day, on a general election day, that he was going to vote for his father, not getting behind the nominee. Obviously, Hogan is no fan of Donald Trump, but in the process of fueling his vitriolic hatred against President Trump, he managed to turn his back on the entire party. And locally speaking, there has been no united message. This is the missed opportunity, especially when you have a Republican Party that is enjoying the popularity of a Governor Hogan. I mean, think about how rare it is to have a Republican governor, then think about how rare it is to have one as popular as Governor Hogan. But the popularity, you need to be careful of that, Republicans in Maryland. Do not necessarily think that the likability with Governor Hogan is going to necessarily translate to votes. And also, don't mistake that his likability is some sort of an endorsement from a policy standpoint. The missed opportunity, and I understand what the governor is doing, and in all fairness, for the most part, he is delivering on what he ran on, which was being a checks and balance to one-party rule, which is what Maryland traditionally, for the most part, has been. And the Democrats having a rubber stamp to push through a very left progressive agenda. And honestly, what Governor Hogan ran on 4 years ago was the power of the veto pen. The missed opportunity was as soon as he was sworn in as governor, the party, with him at the helm of the ship, needed to start to make the pitch on why we need to get Republican and conservative Republicans in the House and the state Senate and start to chip away at the Democratic control in those two chambers and start looking down the road to one day getting rid of Mike Miller and Michael Bush. But that's not a pitch that has been consistently made. And ladies and gentlemen, as many of you know, I was running for Jim Brochin's old seat in the 42nd. Chris West, who's an absolute coward, he's an empty suit. The guy's a joke. Challenged me in court because he didn't want to go up against a true conservative on some residency requirements that I still to this day believe that I was correct in. But the party eats their own. It's what they always do. And the 42nd, for people that aren't familiar with the legislative districts, that would be Cockeysville, Hunt Valley, Towson, parts of Parkville, up through northern Baltimore County, where we need a conservative state senator. Now we have another rhino that'll probably be in there. And it's sad. And Jim Brochin's seat, many I talk to right now, Jim Brochin coming up short in his bid for county executive, wish that he would have stayed where he was in the state Senate. Jim Brochin, much better state senator than Chris West will ever be. And that's what we have now. But remove the 42nd for a second out of the equation. Making the pitch to Marylanders on why conservatism works. And not just being veto-proof, but beginning to take this state in a direction where we could have Republican majorities in the House of Delegates and the state Senate. But has that pitch been made over the last 4 years? No. Quite the opposite. Nothing personal against Governor Hogan. I know him personally. I like him. He's a gentleman. I think he's delivered for the most part on his campaign promises. But you're not going to make real change in this state via the veto pen. You're not going to push legislation through that way. And the reality is you have a Republican governor that's capitulating to the left and has been for a while, believing that's his path to victory. We'll see. We'll see. But my theory on this is you look at the way the Democrats are voting. They're not voting for moderates, not in Democratic primaries. Far, far, far left progressivism and liberalism with Johnny O and Ben Jealous. I think this is a very risky gamble by the governor. And the left, whether it's at the state level or the left, whether it is at the federal level, seems to just have a lack of direction in a big way. And I understand on the surface why wheeling Obama out may seem like a good idea. And look, he's got his sea legs back, okay? He's been resting on the bench for the last 2 years. There's a little bit of a newness feeling to it, I guess. He's energized. But what he's saying makes no sense. And it comes across self-serving. And the reality is, Obama is not going to have a larger stage now than when he had the bully pulpit of the presidency. And when he had that stage, the party was in a tailspin, which is why they lost the House, the Senate, the White House, and then at the state level across the country, Republicans were chipping away with governorships and at the state legislature level. And that was with Barack Obama having the bully pulpit of the presidency, not just a former president speaking at a college. But the Democrats believe that that's going to be their path to victory. We'll see how that works out for everybody. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a holding pattern waiting for the roll call, the vote on Judge Brett Kavanaugh. I do believe that'll happen this week. Regardless, it's kind of it's just a matter of if, not when. Dollars to donuts, he will be serving on the high court. And within 2 years of Donald Trump's first term, 2 picks to the Supreme Court. Kelly, thank you very much. Everybody have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow. Jimmy Mathis Show, of course, your number one destination for that is jimmymathisshow.com. Follow me on Twitter at Jimmy Mathis Show, on Facebook, SoundCloud, iTunes, all the usual suspects where you get your podcast format is where you can get the Jimmy Mathis Show. Everybody, have a blessed day. See you tomorrow. Bye.